Hello, Dr. Scott. This is Brad McElvain from your qualitative analysis class. This is a presentation for the Unit 3 project, which will lead up to the Unit 6 naturalistic observation. And I've entitled this presentation, What We Do While We Wait for Coffee. Here's a little overview for the presentation today. It's pretty much just to provide a background for the upcoming naturalistic observation in Unit 6, which I'll be planning on sitting at Starbucks and watching some coffee customers as they wait for their coffee. The biggest things I'll be looking for is the kind of displacement behavior that those customers will be displaying. I'm expecting a lot of cell phone usage, to be honest, and we'll just talk about today cell phone usage, that observation method that I'll be using, and then the conscious versus subconscious decisions that lead people to displacement behavior. So we'll first start talking about displacement behavior. I think the article written by Mohiuddin, Bauer, and Semple was a really great article that talked about displacement behavior and the correlation with stress. But basically in that article, they explained displacement behavior as any physical action that you can see, kind of like the guy on the right-hand side of the slide, that is really irrelevant to the situation. It's usually a cause and effect based on social discomfort, and really it's just the natural reaction to stress. So it's what's displacement behavior's impact? Why do people do it? Really, it is subconscious reasons. It's people, like I said, just their natural reaction to some sort of social stress. But that article that I read by Mohiuddin, Bauer, and Semple broke the reason why we do displacement behavior down into three social stress kind of alleviations here. It's physical, cognitive, and self-report is at least what they had in their experiment with some people who were subjected to a Trier social stress test. The first thing that displacement behavior did for those participants was it alleviated physical social stress. So they hooked them up to a heart rate machine, and them just scratching their head, playing with their hair, just any sort of weird activity, physical activity there, lowered their heart rate. Cognitively, they were told to carry out some math problems and just do a couple of them. First, without displaying any displacement behavior, at which they were made quite a few mistakes, but once they were able to scratch their face and stuff, they weren't making as many mistakes. And then they also just reported themselves that touching their face, any other sort of displacement behavior actually increased their comfort there. Men versus women, part of that study was a big part of it. Men were actually showing less social stress when they would carry out displacement behavior during the stressful situation, and women actually had a better opportunity to recover from a socially uncomfortable situation due to displacement behavior better than men did. So displacement behavior witness, what's the whole reason for me wanting to do this sort of research is in my life, I've seen a lot of cell phone usage as a really big displacement behavior action these days. It just seems people take their phone out at any opportunity where they just really don't have any planned or they didn't plan for some sort of situation. But why do people go flock to their cell phones? Hoffner and Sangmi gave us a really good explanation as to why that happens. Cell phones are obviously a great social contact device, great for entertainment, and it's a huge distraction from what's bugging people in a socially awkward situation. A lot of people you'll see if they'll pull their phones out and maybe not even open any apps, text messages, or anything. They just hold it in their hand, maybe turn it on, check the time, and turn it back off. And the article that Hoffner and Sangmi wrote really talks about people's positive experience. That's kind of what the cell phone symbolizes. So just taking that phone out of their pocket and using it for a minute or so, or just a few seconds, can alleviate some social stress there. So displacement behavior control, a lot of people do talk about, oh man, displacement behavior being very obvious for somebody to notice, and should it be controlled? Interesting article by Mayhew and Dunbar were talking about smiling and laughing as a form of displacement behavior when it wasn't really relevant to the situation. Yeah, maybe people can control their behavior a little bit to help them out in these three areas: sexual advertisement, competition, and cooperation. Smiling and laughing could help somebody in flirting or in that situation. For competition, smiling and laughing could be some sort of weakness shown in a hierarchy situation where somebody is challenging somebody else's just, I guess, location and their group. And then finally, cooperation, smiling and laughing. If somebody has a common goal, they work with somebody else. Smiling and laughing could actually be very relevant to the situation to make somebody else more comfortable. And then finally, subconscious decision making. Fills unplanned time. It really just comes from not making any plans, and that's where the displacement behavior comes from. And it's just based on social comfort. So the big experiment that I'm going to be trying to do is Starbucks customers, watching them wait for their coffee and looking at their planned actions versus unplanned. So once they get their coffee from the cashier, they'll walk over to the barista and wait for their coffee to be made for them. And I'm really curious to see what they do in that unplanned time as they wait for their coffee. So I'm planning on going to Starbucks one day at 7:30 a.m. for about an hour, expecting up to 100, maybe 50 customers. And then I'll watch the single customers get their to-go orders and see what they do. As we talked about before, cell phone usage is the number one thing I would expect to see. Face touching, playing with hands, scratching, pacing, and maybe conversing with some other people around them. I could get a little bit more information, more data if I break up the participants by gender and age and just see with the results if there are any differences between men and women or younger groups versus older groups. The big research question, how do people spend their time as they wait for their coffee to be made by the barista at Starbucks? Can we easily witness social discomfort through displacement behavior? That's my big research question for the Unit 6 project. And that's a conclusion for today. We really did talk about a lot of displacement behavior and social discomfort. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Thank you for your time, and you have a good night.